Game 8, Alekhine vs. Nimzovich. Alekhine's white. All Russian Masters in St. Petersburg, 1914. It opens with a Ruy Lopez. The most analyzed variation of the Ruy Lopez is knight takes e4, as happened in the game. In the latest practical tests, the results are somewhat in white's favor, and it occurs less and less in master play. This is speaking for 1910, 1920s. d4. Knight beat d2 was played in the game. Bishop e3 was also analyzed after castle knight bd2 and take. And knight a5, bishop c2. Black has a satisfactory game, mostly because of the c4 square. This was better than going f5. After f5 we can take en passant and knight g5 with a good position for white. Not only does black have some weaknesses regarding the light squares, but just he's almost strategically lost just because of the structural drawbacks of the a6 and b5 pawn. Also, bishop g4 is also not so good because of knight takes, and queen d5. Strong move because we are going to recapture or take this guy. So, however, after knight takes d2, black is doing well. Knight bd2, knight c5. It was better to castle, and after bishop c2, f5, and en passant. White's game would not be as good as it was in the actual game, although he still stands favorable because of knight b3. If knight g5, this is not so good because of bishop g4, f3, and bishop c8. So, in the game it was knight c5, bishop c2, of course, bishop g4. If black castles now, then there is a slight difference. Bogolyubov conjured a very nice innovation idea against Reti, starting with knight d4 in the same exact position. Knight takes e5, f4, bishop g4, queen e1, bishop h4, g3, or excuse me, not g3, but queen takes e5, rook e8, knight c6, queen d7, and f5. A very nice idea, and this variation is going to force a win for white. So, bishop g4 was played, rook e1, knight e4. If knight e6, white obtains a fine attacking game after queen d3, and therefore black played knight d4, but this gets refuted by Alekhine's idea, bishop f4. Bishop takes e4, looks like it might win a pawn, right? but it doesn't quite work out because, or let's say rook f takes d8, rook takes e4, and what do you think? How should black continue? It's kind of like a positional, combining positional strategy with tactics. First, bishop f5, rook d2, bishop d3, and now bishop g5, finishing white off, just winning the exchange and the game. Or advantage at the very least. So, very similar to maybe Fischer's style, Alekhine prepares such tactical threats with very natural-looking development moves. Fischer played in the same way where he did this, and I can cover that later, but Fischer played a game where it was bishop c4 variation of the Najdorf, and he could have took on e6, but he prepares the threat of capturing to be even stronger with a preparatory move rook e1. The bishop f4, f5. This pawn offer will ultimately prove to be insufficient, although black's position was already beset with difficulties. If bishop h5, then knight h4 would attain great positional superiority, just completely shutting down the idea with bishop g6. Bishop takes, okay, queen d7. Queen takes c7 was not so possible because of this. So, knight e5, a strong move. Bishop h4. If black takes the rook, then just simply rook takes e4. So, bishop h4. And what do you think? Queen d4 is a strong move and played in the game, because at first glance you might think black wins a pawn with knight takes g3, exploiting the discovered attack. But the problem with knight takes g3 is white has a very nice positional idea, starting with knight c5, a very strong move, and the idea is to vacate the b3 square for the bishop to capture next on d5, and white stands much better. In fact, white is winning. So black is going to be at a huge disadvantage in this position. He plays rook f d8, maybe rook a d8 was slightly better. Not a big difference because the evaluation of the position is almost losing for black. Okay, queen c7 finally renews the threat of knight takes g3 because now knight c5 is nothing. So, to handle this, Alekhine played knight d2. The idea is again to go bishop b3 and kind of let him win a pawn temporarily. Here knight takes g3, just bishop b3, and white stands much better. Knight takes d2 would not be feasible because of bishop captures. Knight c4, bishop b6, and bishop takes d5, rook b1, and simply bishop takes a8. with a winning position. White will have a strong pass pawn on d4. Other tries, well, let's see. In my notes I have bishop g6. Right, this is also not feasible because of bishop b3, knight f6, and knight f3. And I guess that the knight will come to e5 and black is strategically lost. And the d5 pawn is very loose. Winning these kind of positions will be mostly like a matter of technique, kind of like converting a win by improving all the pieces and pressuring the target d5. So, in the game, black took on f2, kind of desperate, but bishop takes f5, knight takes, rook takes, queen takes, bishop e6, and just to run through some moves. Okay, queen f2 was played. However, after rook c6, white should just take. It's the simplest win because there is absolutely no way to stop this passed pawn. And even without the passed pawn, this material advantage would be favorable. So, it's simple. Queen f2, just trying to trade off. Okay, queen h5, queen f3, forcing the queen trade, virtually speaking. He's threatening both to trade and to capture the rook. And there's no targets left in white's position to attack. So he goes ahead and trades, and the rest is just bishop c4, a pretty cute move. I mean, threatening to take, and also basically we could just push next. Also, if the rook captures, then the knight would guard c4 from d2. So this is just winning the exchange. If rook c8, then rook d7, bishop d5. And the point is that black cannot prevent knight d6 at all. So, strong move. In the game, black just went ahead and took the bishop, giving up the exchange, and white has a knight. Okay. Rook c4 was in the game. If rook c2, white can force a mate. Well, kind of. With f4, rook takes a2, knight g5, and now rook takes h7 is unstoppable. So rook c4, knight f2, kind of the same idea in a way, because later on in the game the knight went to g4, afterwards the pawns were like this and the king like this, and then we put the rook on d6 and checkmate. So king g5 was in the game. If rook a4, then knight g4 and rook d5, and we get this variation that I mentioned. So it was king g5 parrying all this, but after rook d5 we were forking the king and the pawn. Now we have this outside passer, and black just resigns. End of game. And what to say? Well, I guess bishop c4 was a killer, but also it was very interesting to see Alekhine's strategic technique. because, of course, he's very well known to be a player of combinations and tactics, but uh, all of this technique is with an eye on strategy. Well, I hope you learned something. That's about it, and thank you.